Hello and welcome to Postgres FM, a weekly show about all things PostgreSQL. I am Michael, founder of PG Mustard, and this is my co-host Nikolay, founder of Postgres AI. Hey Nikolay, what are we talking about today?
Hi Michael, we are talking about some article which attracted my attention.
And I hope not just the article, because the article was about best practices, and I'm hoping to discuss that. Yeah.
I always like 15 mistakes, 25 recipes, this kind of titles.
Clickbait.
Yeah, and honestly, I chose it let's just choose this article, and it attracted my attention just by title. 7 crucial Postgres best practices. Good title, right?
Yeah, and we haven't had an episode called Best Practices, so it's an interesting omission on our part.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Best practices. We had something like mistakes to avoid maybe, right?
Oh, maybe, yeah.
From my experience being in program committee of various conferences and just general conference experience, people love to hear about mistakes. They also love to hear pieces of advice, but mistakes they somehow love more because it's like things to avoid. And and best practices. What does it mean, best practices? Like, do this, not that, right?
Yeah, I've been thinking about this. What's the difference between best practices and good practices? Like, I think it's like shorthand for, if I'm new to this and I don't really know what I'm doing, what are some things I can do to not look stupid? Or to, to at least cover what people generally say is a good idea. Because, in anything complex, especially databases, we know often it depends. Like, it's going to depend on exactly what you're doing as to whether you should do X or Y. So I think these lists and these suggestions are almost fraught with danger from the beginning. But I think they can be useful educationally. Like, they can be useful for people to say, in general, this is a good idea. In general, this is a bad idea.
You could be a great consultant, because you sound like one. Yeah.
Well, what do you think best practices means?
For me, it's not about avoiding to look stupid. It's about I like the word shortcut, like to quickly find what other people already experienced and choose maybe not best, but something better than you would choose on your own, right? So
that's a good point, actually. Not so much about looking stupid, but maybe to avoid things going wrong, like to avoid the most common
the goal is not
traps.
about how we look. The goal is not to look bad when making decisions, engineering decisions around Postgres, but the goal is to make database work better, more reliably, more better performance, avoid data loss, avoid downtime, these kind of things. Actually, correctness is one of the goals, but naturally, Postgres has very good, in most cases, if we don't touch the null topic, right? Null's topic. In this case, if we don't touch null's topic, most of the time Postgres works in very correct way. And predictable, I expect this, I got what expected. And so, in general, 3 areas, big areas are good performance, reliability, and, avoidance of data loss is a big fear of database guys, right? And also no downtime or very short downtime.
Yeah, perfect.
So the big 3 areas. Let's dive into this article. I know we both are not thinking it's a super great material.
Yeah, sadly.
Let's be honest. Well, it's an attempt.
It looks to me like somebody has asked their favorite LLM for a list of Postgres best practices and almost copy and pasted it verbatim into an article. That's what it looks like to me, without much review.
Well, maybe it's even written by LLM. Yeah, I'm not sure. The author name is Zach, and I think it's good that the good attempt is made to bring this again. And actually, it was on Hacker News Top, I guess. That's how it caught my attention. It's a good attempt, but I agree with you. Some parts that maybe it's written purely manually. It's possible, but I would like to just reflect on the fields covered, seven fields. from very beginning, I don't agree that we have 7 practices here. We have 7 fields covered, and inside each field we have some practices mentioned. And you also mentioned that you think there should be more fields covered if we try to have this like kind of digest of tips, right? It's not only these 7. But let's touch my idea. Let's touch every one of these 7, bring up to 3 our own tips we should be
sure
noticed, like involved into consideration. And then in the end, I'm very curious what you think is missing in terms of the fields, the areas, right? So,
yeah, sure.
Deal. Okay. The first field is database design, and discussion is about naming conventions and so on. What you think? What's your number one take when we think about how to make database design good? What makes it good?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm surprised it starts with this. I actually saw some of the Hacker News comments, and it's an odd choice of where to start. But I do see a lot of people making the mistake of using spaces in their names for objects or using mixed case and things. And technically, if they followed this advice, they wouldn't do that. So I do see people making the opposite mistake. So yeah, I don't think it's bad advice. And generally, people do have conventions. I actually follow a lot of the ones that are listed here. So yeah, not bad. How about you?
Well, first of all, I think it's not a mistake if you... My previous startup had a camel case table names. It was inherited, and I understanding very well that it's not super convenient. I left it as is because it was intentional. I also think one step back, database design being the first topic, and then performance will be the next topic, and leaving reliability like backups and HA later. It just shows a tendency that probably this article and this set of tips are targeting more backend engineers, developers, programmers, or those who create some systems rather than purely database folks. And it's totally fine. And also, like if we take managed service, managed Postgres like RDS or something, the important areas like backups, HA are presumably solved already. So we have opportunity to focus on things we deal with every day, like database design, performance. These things are closer to us. So I think I can understand this choice of order. And if we talk about database design, I think the main idea is to have some convention. It can be even camel case with spaces, but you understand you will be forced to use double quotes all the time everywhere. But if it's choice, well, it's inconvenient. I know I was there. And I was there after a couple of other startups where I was, very, very like polishing every symbol. I think this is what matters here. Like convention is important for yourself, for people who work with you also, right? And for LLMs who work with you as well.
But it's a good point. It doesn't really matter. Why is it number one in this list? And there's also no mention in database design and schema design. There's no mention of normalization, which is a bit odd.
Well, let's shift to what we think matters.
Sure.
So you say convention and also we need to normalize the tables. Yeah, I tend to agree. And also, if you think about convention, I love also to think not only about how we name database objects, but also how we write SQL. And I'm a big fan of Mozilla SQL style guide, which is closer to normal programming languages and moving away from this central space colon, right? How to say, like central space thing, like an.
You mean like an underscore?
No, not only so select space blah blah. Then you from, and you need to move from, so you maintain the central space vertical line all the time.
Oh, alignment
consisting of spaces. Alignment, yes. I honestly I hate it so much. I know it's old-fashioned approach, and many books follow this rule, but it's so inconvenient, guys. Right? Let's just take Mozilla SQL style guide, publish it inside your company wiki or documents, like any Confluence or something what you have. Adjust it for your flavor a little bit, and that's it. And agree, okay, we are following this convention. As for normalization, this is, I guess, let's mention the episode we had a couple of weeks ago, 3 weeks ago maybe, with Frank Pachot, right? And about NoSQL versus SQL, and we talked about normalization, denormalization quite a lot there. I agree this is a very important topic to agree on and follow this. Well, also, from me, I think constraints are super important. Like I would say, I would put this as a big, like it's a best practice to use database constraints. All kinds of constraints, understanding the power of them. And also understanding overhead as well.
Yeah, I think it's good default. Like if in doubt, add the constraint, and you might want to remove it in future if you get to a certain scale. But I like the idea of having it by default.
For example, we discussed in the same episode with Frank, we discussed maybe we should have not null constraint by default. Not that, unfortunately, it's not so usually in all systems.
Yeah.
But we can agree, let's put it by default and lift it only if we know nulls are going to be useful. So that's it. I guess three tips enough, right?
What about schema namespacing? Do you use it to organize?
It's interesting. I'm shifting back and forth, and in my career, use namespaces, schemas, or not use them. It depends on the project. Here I am like with you. It depends. If it's
also, it doesn't matter that much, right?
Well, it does, because it's about convenience as well. If you think about others, they can be spending a lot of time trying to find your table. If you, again, it's also consistency here is the key, because if you chose to start using namespaces, schemas, suddenly after a few years of development, and the majority of your tables are in the main, and it happens all the time. Like I see it all the time.
Yeah, sure.
Majority of the tables are in public schema, but suddenly you start using some additional schemas and hide tables there. Basically, it's maintainability as well. For example, you can control permissions better, and it also sometimes namespaces are serving some trick. Like you can have multiple tables with the same name sitting in different schemas but this can lead to some messy state and problems as well. So, but in general, I would say this is part of convention agreements, how we use schemas. So sometimes people choose. This is a good topic, by the way, for maybe one day we should discuss it. Multi-tenant applications and architectures, and what's about like how to create a multi-tenancy with good properties in database. And I just recently learned that if you go to Timescale Cloud, you cannot create database, and you cannot have multiple logical databases in a single server, right? So in single Postgres, usually we are allowed to have multiple logical databases, and their recipe for multi-tenancy, they have an article about this, like let's use schemas and just that's it. But for me, schema is very weak wall between data. Logical database is a big wall between data, because you cannot read from another database being connected to one database. You cannot read from another database not using something like Postgres FDW or DB-Link, because this is how Postgres works. Database name is a part of connection properties, the core connection properties. Unlike schema is kind of it's something
namespace.
And it's namespace, and you can revoke rights to use some schema. It's good. True. But still it's inside the same database. So if you messed up with permissions, you can end up having security issues. If you want strict segregation of data, separation of data for your tenants, Okay, this is different topic. I think quite good. Like we have at least. Let's move on to the performance topic, the second topic,
Perfect.
right?
So they talk about indexing and they talk about query optimization. I think we've in the past talked about a couple of things like micro optimizations and macro optimizations, and I think we could maybe like think in those terms instead. I do think it's obviously performance is a lot about indexing and about individual query optimization, but I do think there's some best practices around macro optimization. Like in Postgres, by default we don't have pgstat statements turned on. That feels to me like a pretty much a best practice that we should probably have pgstat statements on, or an extension for doing that analysis that's on the wider system level. Maybe some logging. Like I think there's some performance logging of slow queries.
Choose just one tip right now. It's already too many.
Oh, a best practice. All right.
Best
I would
practice
say. Well, I like their first one, I guess. Use indexes.
Use indexes is obviously, but I think my take would be don't leave auto vacuum untuned and don't postpone bloat control. This is how Postgres works right now, right? So we must be aware of what bloat is, what dead tuples are, and distinguish them actually. And and be prepared.
They cover that in maintenance.
And this is what nobody do it well among managed Postgres platforms right now. Nobody. I mean, they don't give you good tools. Some of them have basic auto vacuum tuning, right? And that's it. Some of them provide PG repack, and we also have create reindex concurrently, but that's it. Obviously, I see future where more platforms will provide better tools to help you in this area. But so knowing that right now it's on your shoulders when you build some system, this should be not postponed, right? Index is obvious. Like everyone knows index. Let's create indexes. So this tip.
But two important things.
Mm-hmm.
2 important things that aren't mentioned here are do it with concurrently and don't index everything. That's we've done a whole episode on over indexing, but I feel like a whole beginner category of issues are caused by folks creating indexes everywhere.
I agree. And there are dozens of tips we can put there around indexing.
But you said only a couple, right?
Yeah, only a couple, but you already named like more than 5. Register statements. I agree. While we are all sit here and waiting until hackers decide to move this extension to core, we need to keep this tip active. Register statements must be installed in any database. Understanding some very edge case or maybe corner case overhead we also talked about in the past. Good. Okay, good. And that's it, maybe, right? Well, performance is a huge topic. We love it. We had many episodes about performance. But again, auto vacuum tuning, learn indexes, many best practices, and the PGStar statements must be installed, right? I agree on these 3, maybe, right? Good,
perfect,
good. So next field again, it's the list is far from being complete. It's just like the tip of the iceberg, right? So next, security. Suddenly, I would say make sure you don't have Postgres open to the world. Easily
it genuinely was going to be mine as well. That's the main mistake basics. I see people making.
What else?
But obviously, if you're using certain like managed services, that's on by default in a lot of cases. So then it becomes a case of having good.
Right, they open it to public, but protected, maybe, right?
Yes, but
still,
protected
I
how?
agree.
then it becomes about
Yeah,
good password policies and things. Yeah.
Right. But they like this is started with Heroku. I think they also have Postgres open to public and security by obscurity when host name is very large hash.
Yeah.
And username also. Like everything is like large hash, but it's just it's weak security, right? But the password is strong, right? And if it's not MD5 but Scrum, it's something better already, right? But I agree. If you're a serious project, this should not be the case. A port should not be available to public. I think it should be only like local IP address and available only internally in networks VP. Yeah. So good.
Are you saying it depends?
I'm saying that
Just teasing.
I'm not against. Like I can understand people who have platforms who have it open to public because sometimes we want to start very quickly.
Yep.
And at the same time, I would not allow this in a serious project with data of customers, PII, and so on. Like I would not allow this at all. To let this port to be open, even if its password is absolutely like difficult to find. Like because, for example, we have two-factor authentication everywhere, but here we have just one password. Well. What about if it's leaked, right?
Yeah. This is honestly the difficult thing about security best practices, is because best practices with security means do everything you possibly can to secure everything. And that's just often not practical. Like at what cost? At what, what are you trading off? Often you do trade off things for better security. Like, as you were saying, like quickness of getting started or developer experience, like ease of use. So there's like I do think it's a tricky topic to give best practices on, because you don't ever want to say do something that's slightly less secure because it has these other benefits, because it's not a best practice anymore.
Yeah, it also makes me think we could have a bad pieces of advice episode, We could have it.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah,
we did go through. There's a wiki.
Don't do this. My next advice, next tip for security is divide and conquer. So, and unfortunately, many teams don't follow this. So, use different users for different parts of workload. And for example, humans should have different usernames in database, so we could distinguish them quickly and probably limit differently and so on. And parts of application also, it's wise to avoid using the single username for everything.
Yeah, I really like.
Yeah,
I really like that about humans as well. I mean, we don't like to think about it, but if you were to need to remove somebody from a project, it's much easier to do that at the user level if they've got their own user than it is to roll out and, to think about what did they have access to, which passwords did they know that were like team wide or something like that. So yeah, I think I've heard of a similar. In fact, I think this article mentions it, but there's a general concept of principle of least privilege.
Yeah. Well, this is a super important principle, of course, and it should be a habit. It's hard to enforce it. It should be a habit of all the team members, to follow this principle.
But it is also painful, right? Like it is painful because it means anytime you add anything, you then need to add permissions to it, like from all of the things. I get that it's good for security.
Default privileges in Postgres, the concept of default privileges, sometimes you can define them as well.
But is that then the least?
Yeah. Yeah, well, yeah. Another, maybe let's do the last tip. And I'm grabbing the ideas from article, but like we're trying to unwrap them here. Password rotation.
Oh, I hate it. I've written yuck by that.
Well, nobody does it actually. Nobody. Some people do it, but honestly, it's first of all it's a pain.
For me, it's a relic. Of when people used to use the same passwords across multiple services. So I think the risk when I say used to, obviously a lot of people still do.
You think it's a bad advice?
My advice would be make sure all your users are using some password generator or password manager so that they have a unique password per service, because then the risk of their password getting leaked by a different service that then they can use as an attack vector on your service is zero.
Right.
So it's only if you leak the password that it becomes an attack vector, which, do you see where I'm coming from?
Yeah, I understand that. Also, I agree. I think actually Postgres could have improvements in this area. For example, you could say, imagine if it would be possible to define password policies and so on, like for example, to forbid short passwords, simple passwords, and Postgres would ensure it's not happening. Or also PG Bouncer, I don't know, like Postgres first of all. And maybe password retention could be one of the policies if people choose to use it. Right, I don't know. I don't believe in the rules here established and followed at all. It's like I just see companies have this principle and nobody follows this principle, and attempts are like hard. It should be Postgres who enforces this rule to like avoid weak passwords, for example.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Article also mentions RLS, but I think it should be very connected to performance. And to be used with big caution. So it's a controversial topic to just put it. Just let's use RLS. Well, yeah, let's check performance additionally. Okay, next, backup and recovery. If you're on managed service, supposedly it should work good, but it depends on the service, on the provider. Not everyone has good capabilities.
I would say also a best practice would be to have a version, I know we've talked about the difference between a backup and a logical backup or a dump, but if you're on a managed service, I would still recommend having a copy on a period that you're comfortable with off the service.
Yes.
So
automatically created.
Yes.
So diversification of backup locations, and some platform can go down or your account can be stolen, and you must have the backups, maybe not super frequently, but some backups additionally in secondary provider or location, like isolated. It's similar to having backups on the same server where you work, but just a different layer. Same principle, different layer. If all backups in the hands of RDS. And single account, it's not good. Yeah, and unfortunately, if you are on RDS and you want to follow this principle, you need to deal with dumps, logical backups. Unfortunately,
and it's not unique to them. There were quite a lot of service providers that's the only option. Yeah.
I agree. What else about backup and recovery? Testing sometimes, right?
Yeah, I guess that is the other big one, isn't it? It's not a backup unless you know it could be restored.
Yeah, sure.
So some amount of testing those restores.
And I don't think platforms test all your backups. they test only. They test only some of them, and who knows, right? So I think it's a good idea to test, even if you trust them and don't hear bad stories. Still have some testing.
Yeah, well, what's the age-old saying? Like, trust but verify, right? Trust them to do it, but verify it.
Final responsibility is yours. Like, if you lose everything, yeah. So, what else? Like anything else in this area? Backup and recovery. Understand RPO, RTO, and
yeah, I think discuss that. RPO, RTO. I think it's about discussions internally. Like, have those discussions. I think RPO and RTO are really good tools and good things to define, but more importantly, they're good to enforce. You've even had the conversation with, senior management or whoever it is, maybe co-founders. What are our trade-offs here? Like, what are we willing to pay this much more for, like, a reduced amount, or are we willing to lose a tiny bit of data to bring our costs right down? I think those are difficult discussions to have, and not everybody would make the same trade-offs there in different situations.
Let's move on. And next, it was number 4, field number 4. I would jump to field number 7 here, high availability, because in my opinion, backups and like DR, basically, the disaster recovery and HA, they should consider together as the foundation of good database system platform or something. So HA, right? HA, it's interesting. If my number 1 advice is avoid systems which are not HA systems but split brain systems, like replication manager, avoid it. Just avoid it. And I don't know.
Well, if you're going to say a best practice, maybe we would just say Patroni, or what would you say?
Yeah, just Patroni. But right now Cloud Native PG is gaining popularity, and it's not using Patroni. So I wrote on Twitter, anyone experienced already split brains with Cloud Native PG? I'm just wondering. I don't know. So Patroni is definitely huge path to achieve very good quality in terms of avoidance of split brains and maintaining very low downtime in case of primary disappears and so on. Yeah, this is number 1. Like I would just, if possible, choose Patroni. This is my advice. What else?
Or managed service provider. I think that this is where the big, all the cloud providers that offer this, I'm so glad they handle this for me.
A recent case. Like I can speak about this openly. Crunchy Bridge, please don't do backups from primary. Physical backups. They still do. You need to fix this. If you'll follow us, like right now, full backup, if it's not snapshot, even if it's not snapshot. So it should be from some replica, some physical standby. Because it's very I/O intensive. Even cloud snapshots can be I/O intensive. And of course, wall archiving should be on the primary to minimize the lag and minimize the RPO, improve RPO, right? But full backup, if you do it from primary, it's huge stress for the primary. And if it's heavily loaded project, it suffers. What we recently observed, like it was not good. So advice to backup, if it's under your control, organize backup so full backup or delta backup or snapshot is not done not on the primary. It's possible. PG style backups, PG stop backup, they support non-exclusive backups, right? So we can do it on replicas.
Makes sense. And if we've got HA in place, the replica's not doing anything, right? It's not a read replica.
Well, yeah, it depends here, but I agree it's good to do backup from replica which won't be primary. So if we talk in terminology of Patroni, it should be no failover. It should have no failover tag. Probably also no load balance tag, but definitely no failover tag. It's the Patroni terminology. You can put the tag on replica to say no failover, so if failover needs to happen, Patroni won't choose this replica.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
I was actually thinking you did want it to be that one, but yeah, sure.
And then you do backup from it. Well, there is another topic. If you do full backups only from single node, what happens if it has some local corruption and other nodes are fine? So all your backups are corrupted. But it's interesting, already deeper topic. Not like let's talk about HA. We talked about Patroni. Yeah. What else? Lag control, right?
Monitor lag. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, also not monitor, but also it can be tuned.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
To have a very low lag, and also when you do load balancing, it can be very smart logic. Many people already implemented it, or else implemented it in core already. So it can be like if some write happened. This session deals with primary for some time. It can be even smarter, right? Comparing other sense and so on. So you have some. It's not strictly about HA, but it's about load balancing mostly and how we use our replicas. It's like adjacent topic. What else about HA? We don't have a lot of time, unfortunately.
We have a whole episode on it. Let's link to that.
Yeah. What else in this area? Any other tips? Test failovers, right? Or switchovers.
Yeah, true. Yeah.
I remember I chased RDS guys asking, you have this checkbox HA which makes me pay double price for primary, but how can I trust you? I mean, I trust you like in words, but in action, how can I test it? And they implemented that you can test failover, which is great. So simulate primary failure and see how failover happens, how your application experiences it. For example, another tip of advice here is to write application so it has retry logic, right? Not to lose rights. Okay, let's move on because this is like huge areas itself. Each of them are huge areas. What's left? Maintenance and monitoring. Oh, huge area. Development practices, and that's it. Only 2 areas. And I think it's not possible to pack it into a few minutes. Let's only maybe use 1 or 2 tips everywhere. For maintenance and monitoring, we already had a tip to always install PG statements. What else? Your choice.
Well, big mistake I see people doing sometimes is turning off auto vacuum. And the author of this doesn't seem aware of auto vacuum. So that would be my main tip: is keep auto vacuum on and tune it. I know you mentioned tuning.
My tips are 2 of them, like bloat control and index maintenance, and we had several episodes on these topics, and just these must be implemented in any project which aims to grow, even not to huge numbers but some moderate numbers. Okay, and finally development practices, and then your secret area as well. Development practices, what do you think? Version control, code organization? Well,
yeah, I mean, version control's been a best practice for years, but I still think it's harder than it should be. I know we did a whole episode on this.
Yeah.
But some basic, however you choose to do it, some way of tracking what changes have you made to your database, it's some form of version control is so much better than not having anything.
Yeah, well, my advice is straightforward. Based on what we do last 5 years, use proper testing during development and before deployment. And this testing should involve a lot of data. So thin clones or database branching are great.
Or a staging server that has just something that has some reasonable amount of data.
Well, if you're alone, yes, and also even if you're alone, if you work on 2 tasks separately, it's still like single staging is not enough. You need to have. And what if you started doing something and made everything wrong and data is changed? How to restart, right? So database branching is the key.
Or best practice.
Yeah. Yeah. So I recommend in development practices, grow your level of development methodologies, so database branching starts to be involved into all development and testing activities. It will be huge level up. So then this is what we do at Postgres AI. And okay, what's your secret topic, secret area?
Not secret. We've discussed it a bunch while we're talking, but I couldn't believe that config tuning wasn't in. No mention of changing shared buffers even. I don't understand how you can talk about best practices for running Postgres and not talk about changing any settings.
Again, if you are a DS user, I can imagine we talked about HA, but we talked about backups, and it's in this article it's very development focused point of view, developers point of view, things already solved and configuration partially also solved, but we all remember CrunchyBridge tuned random page cost after our complaint.
They did, but I don't think RDS have yet, or most of the others. So random page cost is still the default on most managed providers.
So many things are still default. I'm happy. I have work during consulting. We help,
but do you see what I mean?
People still. Yeah.
I know that could be covered, but it really just wasn't mentioned. And then the other big one, I'm sure there are others that have. It's hard to spot the absence of things, right, when you go through something. But I couldn't believe I didn't see a single mention until the conclusion of upgrades, of staying, even in security, we didn't mention staying up to date with the latest minor versions. And in performance, we didn't talk about upgrading to major versions. That feels to me like a best practice should be to stay up to date.
Yes. I agree. It's part of our healthy Postgres vision. Definitely minor upgrades, major upgrades, for sure. It's part of our health check we do. 100%
Everything
agree.
that's in your health check, in my opinion, should be your best. Like if you're,
Yeah.
if that's, yeah, that makes sense.
And so also still like I always have feeling it's not enough. We need to extend all the time.
Yeah.
Some things go away, like upgrades we will have in 18. They will have statistics, so
True.
this tip will go away. But so many tips are still coming. Okay, I think it's great. Like maybe not very well structured, but I hope some people heard some good pieces of advice today. Let us know in the comments, please, or on Twitter or LinkedIn somewhere. Good. And we have document actually. Maybe it's a good time to remind that we have a document with ideas, and also if something is missing, and we could dive into some topic.
Yeah, you
Right.
mean, so we've got a document that lets people request or suggest episode ideas.
Right.
Yeah, topic suggestions.
Yeah. Good.
Nice.
Good.
Thanks, Nikolay. Catch you next week.
Thank you. Bye bye. See you.